The rope burned against her throat as Sarah Mitchell swayed from the ancient oak, her bare feet dancing inches above the dusty ground. Through the haze of suffocation, she could see the bounty hunters crouched behind fallen logs and rocky outcroppings, their rifles gleaming in the dying light of the Arizona sunset. They had used her as bait, strung her up like a scarecrow to draw out the Apache warrior whose head would fetch them $1,000 in silver. But as the crimson moon began its ascent over the desert horizon, Sarah's fading vision caught sight of a figure emerging from the sagebrush. A tall, powerful silhouette moved with the fluid grace of a predator, war paint gleaming on bronze skin, a tomahawk catching the last rays of sunlight. The Cherokee warrior they called Fudge Kitchett, the brave one, stepped into the clearing with the quiet confidence of a man who had never known defeat. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, not from fear, but from recognition. Those eyes, dark as midnight pools, fierce yet somehow gentle, she had looked into them before. 20 years ago, when she was just a child of 8, and he was a wounded boy bleeding out by the creek behind her family's homestead. Chapter 1. The Thread of Memory *. 20 years earlier, young. Sarah had found him crumpled among the cattails, his small body broken and bleeding, arrow wounds festering in his shoulder and thigh. White men had attacked his village, he whispered in broken English, mixed with Cherokee words. His family was gone. The fever was taking him. Sarah's father, Ezra Mitchell, was a hard man shaped by frontier survival, but her mother, Mary, still carried the soft heart of the Philadelphia lady she'd once been. When Sarah brought them to the boy, tears streaming down her freckled cheeks, Mary couldn't turn away. "He's just a child, Ezra," Mary had whispered, kneeling beside the wounded boy. "Look at him. He's no more dangerous than our Sarah." For 3 weeks, they nursed him in secret in their root cellar. Sarah would steal down with bowls of her mother's soup, staying to practice the Cherokee words he taught her in return. "Besitja via lichi, I care about you. Galv kodiu, hiat, I love you." She was too young to understand the weight of such words, but she treasured them like precious stones. The boy's name was Besitja Wayat, like the great Cherokee leader, but he told Sarah to call him by his spirit name, which meant him in Cherokee, but in his tribe meant the one who remembers everything. When he was strong enough to travel, Nevi had taken her small hands in his, and spoken words that would echo across the decades. "You saved my life, little golden hair. Among my people, this creates a bond that death cannot break. I owe you a life debt. Someday, I will repay it." Then he was gone, melting back into the wilderness like morning mist. Chapter 2. The weight of years. Sarah never saw him again, but she never forgot. As she grew from child to woman, the frontier around her grew harder and more violent. The gold rush brought desperate men westward, and with them came a brutality that seemed to poison the very air. Her parents died in a cholera outbreak when she was 19. Alone and vulnerable, Sarah had learned to survive by her wits and her Winchester rifle. She became a teacher in the rough mining town of Copper Creek, educating the children of prospectors and cattlemen, while dodging the crude advances of lonely men who saw her red gold hair and cornflower blue eyes as a prize to be won. She was 28 now, an old maid by frontier standards, but she had never married. How could she explain to the rough cowboys and merchants who courted her that her heart had been touched by a Cherokee boy's promise 20 years past? That sometimes, in her dreams, she still heard him whisper Galv kodiu, hiat, in that young voice full of pain and gratitude. The world had grown crueler to the Cherokee since then. The government's relocation policies had scattered the tribes, and those who remained in their ancestral lands were hunted like animals. Men like the bounty hunters who had taken her, Cyrus Beck and his gang, made their living tracking down renegade Indians for the reward money. They had grabbed her 3 days ago, as she rode home from the schoolhouse, recognizing her as the woman who had been seen talking to Cherokee traders at the general store. In their twisted logic, she was an Indian sympathizer, which made her perfect bait for the warrior they hunted. "That savage killed 2 of Beck's men last month," one of the bounty hunters had explained with cruel relish, as they tied her to her horse. "Pulled 'em right off their horses with a war cry that'd freeze your blood. Beck's been tracking him for weeks, but the Red Devil's too smart, stays in the deep desert where white men die of thirst. But every warrior's got a weakness. They can't resist saving a white woman in distress." Chapter 3.
Other the fatigues.
The hunter becomes the hunted now, swaying from that rope as the moon climbed higher. Sarah watched Besijit make, though the bounty hunters knew him as Besijit Kichi, survey the trap with the calculated patience of an apex predator. 20 years had transformed the wounded boy into something magnificent and terrible. His chest was broad and powerful, his movements liquid and precise. Scars decorated his bronze skin like a map of battles survived, but his face, older now, weathered by sun and conflict, still held those same dark eyes that had looked at her with such desperate gratitude so long ago. He couldn't recognize her, she realized. The little girl with braided pigtails was now a woman with long, unbound hair, and she hung silhouetted against the darkening sky. To him, she was just another white woman used as bait by his enemies. The bounty hunters were growing impatient. "Come on, you red bastard," Cyrus Beck muttered from behind his boulder. "Take the bait." Sarah tried to call out, but the rope had tightened around her throat, reducing her voice to a harsh whisper. She could only watch as began to move, circling the clearing like a wolf, studying a trap. He was magnificent, every step deliberate, every motion economical and purposeful, but he was walking into certain death. Beck had 5 men positioned around the clearing, all crack shots with their rifles trained on the spaces between the trees. As moved closer, Sarah could see the internal battle playing out across his features. His warrior's instincts warned him this was a trap, but his honor demanded he try to save an innocent woman. She had heard the stories of his exploits, how he had become a legend among both his people and their enemies. They called him Make, Chichi because of his courage, but his Cherokee name, Make, meant something deeper, the one who remembers everything. And what he remembered, above all, was that strength meant nothing without compassion. Chapter 4, The Dance of Death. Make, stepped into the killing ground, just as the moon reached its zenith, bathing everything in silver light. For a moment, he stood perfectly still, his eyes meeting Sarah's across the distance. Something flickered in his gaze, a moment of uncertainty, as if some half-remembered dream was stirring in the depths of his memory.
"Now!"
Beck shouted. The rifles cracked in unison, but Make, was already moving. He rolled behind a fallen log as bullets whined overhead, then came up with his bow drawn. His first arrow took Beck's lieutenant through the throat. The second punched through another bounty hunter's chest before the man could reload. The clearing erupted into chaos. Gunsmoke filled the air as the remaining hunters scrambled for better positions. Make, moved like a ghost between the shadows, his tomahawk gleaming as he closed with Beck's men. The sounds of battle, war cries, gunshots and dying screams echoed off the canyon walls. Sarah struggled against her bonds, feeling the rope tighten further around her throat. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision. She was dying by inches, and the man she had saved as a child was fighting for his life just yards away, still not knowing who she was. Through the smoke and confusion, she saw Beck himself creeping around behind Make, his rifle raised for a killing shot. With the last of her strength, Sarah managed to croak out a single word, not in English but in Cherokee. Make, The warrior spun at the sound of his true name, his tomahawk flashing upward just as Beck's rifle fired. The bullet meant for Make, heart, instead creased his shoulder, and his tomahawk buried itself in Beck's chest. The bounty hunter fell backward, his rifle clattering across the rocks, but the effort cost Make, precious seconds. The last of Beck's men had him in his sights, finger tightening on the trigger. When Sarah's vision finally gave out, the rope had done its work. She was dying. Chapter 5, Recognition. When Sarah next opened her eyes, she was lying on soft earth beside a small fire, her throat raw but free of the rope. Make, knelt beside her, his shoulder bandaged with strips torn from his shirt. His dark eyes were wide with an emotion she had never expected to see there, wonder. My elite's ache, he whispered, reaching out to touch her face with trembling fingers. Yellow hair, the little girl by the creek. Sarah tried to speak, but only a croak emerged. Make, lifted a water gourd to her lips, supporting her head as she drank. The water was sweet and cool, flavored with herbs that eased the burning in her throat. "I remember everything," he said quietly. "Your mother's soup, the Cherokee words you tried so hard to pronounce, the way you cried when you thought I might die." His voice was deeper now, roughened by years and battles, but it still carried that same gentleness she remembered from the boy by the creek. "You saved me again," Sarah managed to whisper. "The rope, no, make, shook his head. "You saved me. If you had not called my name when you did, Beck would have killed me. The debt between us is balanced now." Sarah struggled to sit up and he helped her, his strong hands gentle on her arms. Around them, the desert was quiet. The bounty hunters lay still among the rocks and sagebrush. Dawn was breaking over the eastern mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. "They're all dead?" she asked. Make, nodded grimly. "They chose to hunt human beings for money. The desert has claimed them." Sarah looked at this man who had been a boy in her memories for so long. The years had carved lines around his eyes and mouth, and his body bore the scars of countless battles. But when he looked at her, she could still see the wounded child who had whispered Cherokee words in the darkness of her family's root cellar. "What happens now?" she asked. Make, was quiet for a long moment, staring into the dying embers of the fire. "My people are scattered. The government pushes us further west with each passing year. Soon there will be nowhere left to run." "Then don't run," Sarah said quietly. He looked at her with surprise. "What do you mean?" "The schoolhouse in Copper Creek needs a new caretaker. Someone to maintain the building, chop wood, fix what breaks." She reached out and took his hand, feeling the calluses from years of bow and tomahawk. "The pay is modest, but there's a small cabin behind the school. It's not much, but it's honest work."
Nivi?
Stared at their joined hands.
"All would do this."
"Risk the anger of your people to help me,"
"You're not my people and your people."
Sarah said firmly.
"We're just people."
"And I'm tired of a world that says we can't choose who to care about based on the color of our skin or the language of our prayers."
Chapter 6.
The choice Nivi was silent for so long that Sarah began to fear she had offended him. But when he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "When I was a boy, dying by that creek, I prayed to the spirits to let me live long enough to become a man worthy of the kindness you showed me."
"I thought that meant becoming a great warrior, feared by my enemies and respected by my people."
He lifted his eyes to hers. "But perhaps it means something else entirely." Sarah felt her heart hammering against her ribs. "What does it mean?" "Perhaps it means learning that the greatest courage is not in fighting, but in choosing love over fear." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her palm gently. "In Cherokee tradition, when someone saves your life, you belong to them. But I think I belonged to you long before that rope around your neck." Sarah felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "The people in town won't understand. They'll call me a traitor to my own kind. And my people will say I have abandoned the old ways for the white world." Nivi smiled, and for a moment, he looked exactly like the boy she remembered. "But perhaps it is time for new ways. Ways where a Cherokee man and a white woman can choose each other, without the world calling it betrayal." Sarah leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, breathing in the scent of sage and wood smoke that clung to his skin. "It won't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is," he replied. "But we will face it together."
Chapter 7.
New beginnings. 6 months later, Sarah stood at the window of the schoolhouse, watching Maviette, who had taken the name Nathan Mitchell for the sake of town records, splitting wood behind the building. The children had taken to him immediately, drawn by his patient manner and the fascinating stories he told of desert animals and ancient Cherokee legends. The townspeople had been another matter entirely. There had been angry meetings, threats, and more than one attempt to drive them both out of Copper Creek. But Sarah had faced down the hostility with the same courage that had once driven her to save a wounded boy, and gradually, grudgingly, the town had begun to accept their unusual arrangement. It helped that Nathan was undeniably useful. His knowledge of desert survival had saved 3 children who got lost in a flash flood. His skill with medicinal plants had eased the suffering of many during a harsh winter outbreak of influenza. And when a group of genuine outlaws had threatened the town, Nathan's reputation as the legendary Kitchy had been enough to send them riding hard for the territorial border. Mrs. Mitchell, 8-year-old Lucy Patterson, tugged at Sarah's skirt. "Will you tell us the story again, about the Cherokee brave and the little girl?" Sarah smiled down at the child, one of many mixed-race children who had appeared in Copper Creek as the frontier grew more diverse. Lucy's father was a former Buffalo soldier who had stayed after his army service, and her mother was Mexican. In the schoolhouse, such differences mattered less than curiosity and kindness. "Which part of the story do you want to hear, Lucy?" "The part where they find each other again." Lucy clapped her hands. "After all those years." Sarah glanced out the window again, catching Nathan's eye. He smiled and touched his heart, a gesture that had become their private way of saying galv quote you hey across any distance. "Well," Sarah said, settling into her chair as the children gathered around, "sometimes the most important promises are the ones we make when we're too young to understand what they really mean." Chapter 8. The Bonds That Endure. As the seasons turned and the frontier gradually gave way to civilization, Sarah and Nathan built a life that defied every convention of their time. They never formally married. No preacher in 3 territories would perform such a ceremony, but their bond was deeper than any legal document could make it. Sarah continued teaching, expanding her one-room schoolhouse to accommodate the growing number of children whose parents trusted her with their education. Nathan became the town's unofficial guardian, using his skills to track lost travelers, negotiate with hostile tribes, and maintain the delicate peace that kept Copper Creek from the violence that plagued other frontier settlements. Together, they created something new, a small oasis, where Cherokee wisdom blended with frontier pragmatism, where children learned to read Shakespeare and track deer prints with equal enthusiasm, where the color of one's skin mattered less than the content of one's character. There were challenges, of course. Federal agents came twice to arrest Nathan on old warrants, but both times the entire town rallied to his defense, claiming they had never heard of any Cherokee warrior named Kitchy. They only knew Nathan Mitchell, the schoolhouse caretaker who had saved their children and helped their community thrive. Sarah's own family back east disowned her when word of her savage paramour reached Philadelphia society. But she found that losing the approval of people who had never bothered to know her heart was a small price to pay for gaining the love of someone who understood her soul. On quiet evenings, they would sit on the porch of their little cabin, watching the desert sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Nathan would speak of the Cherokee belief that love was the force that held the world together, not romantic love alone, but the love that connected all living things in an endless web of mutual responsibility and care. "My grandmother used to say that every soul chooses its own path before birth," he told Sarah one evening, as they watched the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "But sometimes, 2 souls choose to walk the same path, in this life, and all the lives that follow." Sarah took his hand, feeling the strength and gentleness that had drawn her to him across the span of years. "Do you think that's what happened to us, that we chose each other before we were born?" Nathan was quiet for a moment, considering. "I think," he said finally, "that love like ours doesn't happen by accident. It happens because 2 people recognize something in each other that goes deeper than names or faces or the families we were born into. Something that was there before words, and will be there after words are forgotten." Chapter 9. Legacy. 25 years after that night, when Sarah hung from the bounty hunter's rope, she stood in the cemetery outside Copper Creek, holding the hand of a small boy with dark eyes and copper-colored hair. Nathan lay beneath the simple wooden cross, taken by a fever that even his knowledge of Cherokee medicine couldn't cure. The entire town had turned out for his funeral, cowboys and shopkeepers, Mexican families and former slaves, even a delegation of Apache, who had ridden 50 miles to pay their respects to the man who had been their enemy, then their ally, and finally their friend. "Tell me again about grandfather Nathan," the boy said, squeezing Sarah's weathered hand with his small one. Sarah smiled through her tears. Daniel was Nathan's great-nephew, the son of his sister's daughter, who had died in childbirth the previous winter. Nathan had insisted they take the boy in, and Sarah had discovered that love could expand to encompass not just a partner, but a child who needed the guidance they could provide together. "He was the bravest man I ever knew," Sarah said softly, "not because he wasn't afraid, but because he chose love even when love seemed impossible. Like when he saved you from the bad men. Like that, yes. But also like when he chose to stay here with me instead of running away to places where it would have been easier to be Cherokee. Like when he chose to help people who had been taught to hate him. Like when he chose to raise you as his own son, even though you weren't born to us. Daniel nodded solemnly. At 8 years old, he was already showing signs of his great-uncle's quiet wisdom and Sarah's fierce determination. The town's children adored him, and he moved easily between the Anglo, Mexican and Native communities that had learned to coexist in Copper Creek. "Will you tell me the story tonight?" Daniel asked. "About the little girl and the Cherokee boy." "Of course," Sarah said. "But now we have a new ending to the story." "What's the new ending?" Sarah looked out over the desert, where the setting sun painted the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Somewhere out there, she could almost hear Nathan's voice carried on the evening wind, speaking the Cherokee words he had taught her so long ago. *Galvquodiuhi, Galialitsahi. The new ending, she said, is that love doesn't die when the people who carry it die. It lives on in the children they touch, in the communities they build, in the choices they inspire others to make. Your great-uncle Nathan taught me that love isn't just something that happens between two people. It's something that spreads like ripples in a pond, touching lives in ways we can never fully know. Daniel was quiet for a moment, processing this with the seriousness that children bring to life's deepest truths. "So the story never really ends?" "No, sweetheart," Sarah said, lifting him up to carry him back toward town, where the lights of their little schoolhouse glowed warm and welcoming in the gathering darkness. "The story never ends. It just finds new people to tell it through." Epilogue. The message endures. Years later, when Sarah herself was laid to rest beside Nathan, the people of Copper Creek would speak of them as the couple who had proven that love could transcend any boundary, race, culture, time, and even death itself. Their story became legend, passed down through generations of school children who learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act with love despite fear. The schoolhouse they built together still stands, now expanded into a full academy that draws students from across the Southwest. On the wall hangs a simple plaque, written in both English and Cherokee. "Love is the force that connects all living things. When we choose love over fear, we choose to make the world whole." Below it in smaller script are the words that Nathan whispered to Sarah on their last evening together, as she held his fevered hand and promised him that their love would endure whatever came. "Some bonds are stronger than death, deeper than time, and more lasting than the mountains themselves. What we have built together, in this place and these children, in the choice to love without conditions, this will outlive us all," and so it has. In Copper Creek, Arizona, where the desert meets the sky, and the past touches the future, love continues to transcend all boundaries, proving that the human heart knows no limits when it chooses to see the world not as it is, but as it could become. For love, true love, is not constrained by the accidents of birth or the prejudices of society. It recognizes only one truth, that we are all part of the same story, all connected by invisible threads of compassion and understanding, all capable of choosing hope over fear, acceptance over hatred, and love over everything that would divide us. In the end, that is the message that echoes across the years from a small frontier town where a Cherokee warrior and a white school teacher dared to love without limits. **. Love transcends all boundaries because love itself is the boundary that connects us all. **.